Nonprofit governance.
Nonprofit answers.
Nonprofit board.
Nonprofit management.
Nonprofit marketing.
Nonprofit resources.
Welcome to Nonprofit Everything, the podcast where hosts Andy Shurick and Stacey Wedding answer your questions about all things nonprofit.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Everything. We have a very special guest with us today, Linda Bridges. Welcome, Linda.
Hi, Stacey. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. So I'm going to share a little bit of your background, and then you can add a fun fact or two if there's something I missed or something that you just want to, let the audience know before we dive in today. We'll also include your full bio in the notes. So Linda Bridges serves as the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at SafeNest, a nonprofit dedicated to ending the epidemic of domestic and sexual violence. And in this role, Linda actually directs all strategic marketing, communications, community relations to increase all the things we want to be doing in the nonprofit sector, right? Brand awareness, donor engagement, and community support. She's also worn hats and had big roles at the Girl Scouts of Southern Nevada, the City of North Las Vegas, and Miracle Flights. So we have somebody who's been through a lot in the communications world with a lot of different organizations and has seen quite a few stories, right, Linda?
Just a few. Yeah, just a few stories.
Is anything you want to share with our listeners that I didn't cover? That was all the professional stuff, but anything fun or personal about you that you want folks to hear?
Yeah, I've been in Las Vegas since 2013, and I moved here from Southern Illinois, right across the river from St. Louis. And my husband was stationed here with the U.S. Air Force, and he's a proud U.S. Air Force veteran.
Woohoo! Well, we thank him for his service, and we thank you for being on with us today. So let's get started. Here's the question we got. We had someone, write us and say, I'm a new nonprofit leader of a grassroots organization. I need media training. And the person was very humble and mentioned how overwhelming it can feel when you're a small grassroots nonprofit. You don't have any processes in place. You don't have any systems in place for how to deal with the media, and shared that she had done a newspaper interview not that long ago, and that once she hung up that phone with the writer, she knew she had talked too much, and she was like, it's time to get the training. And so that is what led us to saying we need to find someone. I know enough to be dangerous from many years ago when I started in PR, but I'm certainly not the expert that Linda is. And we needed to bring in an expert and say, what tips can you give to smaller, any nonprofit, but let's also keep in mind this person's, from more of a smaller grassroots organization, just getting their feet wet. So Linda, any thoughts? That's probably a really big loaded question, but take it from here and share.
You know what? First of all, what a great opportunity for this nonprofit. We need grassroots organizations in this country. We are really sort of the social fabric and safety net. And so I commend that person for being in that role. And really, whether you're a grassroots organization or a large organization like SafeNest, we all have a very limited budget and honestly a limited amount of time. So when you're looking at media training, which I think every C-suite executive level needs in a nonprofit, whether you're the CFO or the CCO or the CEO, when you're looking at what do I do to help myself be better prepared for interacting and engaging with the media, number one, you can probably find someone in your community who is well-versed in this space, who maybe is a news anchor or on the radio, that you can reach out to and say, hey, I just need 30 minutes of your time. I'm new to this space. I'm new to interacting with the media. How do I know when to pull back versus how much to say? Reach out to someone like that in your community. I've also seen really helpful things within the American Marketing Association, the Public Relations Society of America. They often have volunteers who will help you for maybe 30 or 40 minutes, kind of lay that groundwork for being able to handle the media.
I love those suggestions and all very tangible resources. for those listeners that also want to hear some live tips from someone who's been through it, what have you found to be the best practices or the tips for how to engage, interact with media successfully?
So I think some tips about engaging and communicating with the media is number one, be really straightforward when you reach out. So if I'm reaching out to the media about with a press release or something we have going on at SafeNest or something I'd like to promote, number one, I try to make it crystal clear. Here's what we're advertising, here's what we're promoting, and here's why it's really important to the community. One of the things people have to realize is news desks and reporters, they're getting tons of emails, tons of tweets to their inbox every day. You have to stand out. So you have to make it really, make sure that your communication is really necessary. And then do not be afraid to follow up. The number of times I've heard from a reporter that has said, oh my gosh, thank you for sending another email. Your first one got lost in my inbox is countless. They're really busy folks. So be sure to follow up. And then when you go in for that interview, make sure you're prepared. Make sure that you have your talking points. One of the other things I love to do, and this is maybe an aside from your original question, but I practice in front of a mirror. I practice my question and answer. It might feel super awkward at first, but then you just get used to it. But it allows you to see your facial expressions. It allows you to see, do I play with my hands too much? Do I play with my hair? Am I not looking directly, in the reporter's eyes when I'm speaking? So be prepared when you walk in so you are your most confident self.
I love that. I love that advice. And I don't think it's silly at all, because I think sometimes prepping ourselves and making sure we have the right words and making sure it sounds natural, even though it is very planful and intentional, is important. And there's an art to that. So it doesn't sound like you're a robot, right? Reciting a bunch of things. You've got to come across as the warmth factor. I'm sure, Linda, you've got to make it so that that person and that receiver on the other end listens to you or sees you or reads something and feels connected to you in some way. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. When I go in for an interview, I am in the mindset of, I am telling my best friend about this. It is my best friend asking me questions about my job, about what I do every day. And it just makes it a more natural conversation instead of feeling like I have all these eyeballs on me. I have a camera on me. Like, how many people are watching? It's me and a friend sitting down talking about my job. And pretty soon, those 3 minutes have flown by. And you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. But that getting to that place does take a lot of practice and patience.
Do you have any recommendations for nonprofits who are deeply passionate, particularly at grassroots? If this is, a founder or the person said they were a new nonprofit leader, right, of a grassroots small organization, so probably wearing multiple hats. Do you have recommendations of how to take all that passion that can turn into a 30-minute monologue if we're not careful, and boiling it down into succinct sound bites, or for those who aren't familiar with sound bites, you can elaborate on that, but those succinct nuggets of information so that we're not losing people?
Great question. So I think you have to boil that down to your 3 talking points. What are the 3 things you want someone to remember? A lot of that is, kind of the who, what, where, why, how. Okay, that was 5 things, but you really want them to remember 3. So maybe you have an event that's coming up that you're pitching and you're talking about. Where's it at? What time? How do people sign up? And then you and the reporter will talk about the why. But those 3 things are the most important. That's what you want somebody to take away from that interview. I always sit down and I kind of look at that because they'll send you a guest sheet. And what's great about the news media, especially if it's an on-camera interview, is you can tell them what to ask you. So what are the most important things you want to get across? Maybe it is an event, maybe it's a call to action in your community, but those 3 things you can outline for that reporter so they know exactly what to ask you and exactly how you want to answer.
I didn't even realize that that was an option. So, and I'm sure some of our listeners didn't either. So you get to kind of have the control a little bit in that scenario, right? Because that's what I think people are worried about, is losing control, or what happens if they get asked a question that they're not comfortable answering or don't know the answer to. Any words of advice in those situations?
Yes, you are in control of that interview. When you go in for an interview, whether it's on camera, whether it's a news reporter for a local newspaper, you control that interview. So you can say, if they decide to go off script, you know what, I'm actually here to talk about X, Y, and Z. And I want to stay focused on X, Y, and Z. Maybe at another time we can talk about that. But you have to remember that you control that interview. You can also stop that interview, especially if it's a, newspaper or something like that, at any time. If you're on air, it's a little bit of a different story, but you can kind of maneuver that interview any way you want. So you're in control, you're confident, and you control that interview.
That's magic, I think, to many of the listeners' ears.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you don't realize that when you walk into a news studio, it can be very intimidating. You have your lights, you've got the camera, the reporter is experienced. They also, for the most part, want to make sure you look good, right? Because they want to make sure you're telling your story. They also, as a responsible journalist, want to make sure they're telling your story accurately. So you both are kind of on the same side in a lot of ways. But I think as you go in as a guest, just remember you're coming in from a place of confidence and control.
That's said by a very powerful woman, right? It sounded powerful and strong. And you can tell the difference between those of us who get a little nervous and jitters when we do it versus someone who's a seasoned professional, right? You did this in your sleep. I do think there is something, it is another human being. And I think I will just share from my own experience that sometimes I think, even though they have a job to do and you have a job to do, it is a human to human connection. And I think being able to be relatable and connecting, that human connection piece is so critical. And I think comes across, we've all seen it on air. We've heard something where someone feels just so stilted, and it's really a missed opportunity to shine.
You know what? Absolutely. So I always practice the night before. I write out my answers. And I read something years ago that you remember things when you write it down in blue ink. I don't know why, but that's a thing. So the night before an interview, especially on TV, I'll write down what I want to remember in blue ink. And then I rehearse it a couple times before I go to sleep. It's cemented. It's in my dreams. I wake up. And then I practice it in my car. I practice what that reporter is going to ask me. I practice how I'm going to say it. Yes, you're talking to yourself in your car. People are going to see that. But it's going to help you when you enter that studio just feel so calm, cool, and collected. And to your point, it is another human being. They're there to find out about you and about your work. And when you work in a nonprofit space, you are doing the important work of the community. The community needs you, and that reporter knows that.
I also am wondering what your thoughts are on make it news. And so I was taught that lesson years ago of sometimes we think, because we care about our own mission so much, that it is news to everybody. And great, you need the world. We need everyone to know about it, right? And so can you speak a little bit? I think you know where I'm going with this, Linda. Can you speak a little bit to how you make this actually valuable information, how to know when it's newsworthy, and how to actually make it perhaps newsworthy or connect it to something newsworthy to get your foot in the door?
I love this question. So you do have to be tuned in to your local, maybe even national news. One of the things that I would do when I was at the Girl Scouts of Southern Nevada, and people always think of Girl Scouts as cookies, which is definitely a big part of the program, but there were so many other things that we did at that organization. We taught leadership skills and business skills and STEM. And so anytime there was an article in the paper, there was a story about, let's say, a famous scientist that won the Nobel Prize, I would reach out to that news a reporter and say, hey, I just saw that great story. I don't know if you know about this, but my organization actually does these great STEM courses specifically for young women. I'd love for you to talk about that. If you can connect your organization and your mission to something relevant happening today, that reporter is more apt to reach out to you and say, actually, yeah, that's a great connection. I'd love to bring you in. So you kind of have to be in the zeitgeist. You have to understand what's happening in the news today. Maybe it's a negative story, but if you can hitch your wagon to that and say, hey, this is a negative story happening, but here's what we're doing in our space to combat that negativity, and I'd love to talk to you about it, that news reporter probably didn't even think about that angle. So that's a real easy way for you to connect to a reporter and say, I'm doing half the work for you. Here's a pitch. You know, you may not have even thought about this, but here's what we're doing. I'd love to talk to you about it. What a great way to get your foot in the door.
I imagine reporters are endlessly grateful for that because they've got a lot coming at them, right? And here you are trying to make their life a little easier. Here, let me actually give you something that is a pretty compelling story and is going on out there, and here's how we can connect it. So you're sort of helping do their job a little bit and helping make their life easier.
Yes, and we all need that. You know, we all need some help, right? You know, again, it's probably an angle they didn't even think about. And it's an angle that other networks maybe aren't going to cover. And so they're always looking for that edge. So you kind of have to be on the top of your game a little bit. And so don't be afraid to reach out. And I think a lot of people are intimidated by news reporters and they don't think they can reach out. The other thing I do is, you know, on X, you know, we follow a lot of reporters on X, and if they post something or even something personal, right? Like, oh, I used to be a Girl Scout, right? I would reach out to them and say, we'd love to have you come in and talk to us. And sometimes it's not even a news interview. Sometimes it's just come in and get to know our organization. Come in for a tour. Meet our CEO, you know, spend 20 minutes with us and find out what we do. That way, the next time there's a story in that field, they know who to reach out to. And there's that personal connection. That's so important.
What do you recommend for folks figuring out who they need to contact in the media to actually get their story even listened to? Or is it, and I know things have changed from back in my day when I did this many years ago. I remember having to do the good old fashioned phone, and do my pitch to the assignment editor at the news stations. And let me tell you, there's nothing that gives you thicker skin than being told no over and over again, because there's a lot of competing priorities. So can you walk us through a little bit of how to go about it, who the right person is in print and, you know, in all the media? I don't know if there's sort of a go-to source, and what's the best way to kind of capture their attention. Does it depend on the person, I guess, is the question, or is there sort of a protocol that all of us should know about?
Yeah. I mean, I have a running list. I mean, it's a running Excel sheet of reporters in town, what they cover, the types of news they like to cover. Are they the morning shift? Do they cover late night? Do they need to come into the office at 5 p.m. versus 5 a.m.? I literally have a running list because, to your point, the landscape constantly changes. Reporters are constantly moving markets, and you have to be on top of that, know who's covering what and where. So I look to that list quite often. So if we do have a breaking news story, I know who to reach out to, or if we do have a very specific pitch, I know who to reach out to. That's just sort of a running Excel sheet. We're pretty active on X. I mean, a lot of reporters are still really active on X, so I follow them there and I kind of see, like, what are they tweeting about? Some of it is in their own personal life. And so it's like, oh, this person really loves, you know, the Golden Knights, and maybe we will have a partnership with them at some point. I can reach out to them. I think it's important to stay really informed about your local reporters, even though it can feel sometimes like another job. But I think it's really important to stay informed on who they are and what's important to them. Because then when you make that reach out, it's going to be way more personal than just a cold email to the news desk.
And is it email? I mean, is it email? Is it call? Is it, let me message you on social? Is it all of the above, depending on each reporter and their preference, or the assignment desk and their preference? what have you found to be the trends out there these days?
I think it's still email. That's what I'm hearing from a lot of reporters is just send me an email. We talked about this before. I mean, they're just inundated. Their inbox is inundated. Their, X account is inundated. So if I have a specific pitch to a reporter, I will email that reporter directly, but I will usually copy the news desk. So maybe that reporter is out on an assignment or there's a breaking news story and they don't see it. The news desk will, and maybe they'll flag them down and say, hey, you've got to get back to this person. They have a great pitch for you. So I think email's still the primary form of communication. I rarely pick up the phone these days unless it's a text, honestly. And I have a few reporters, cell phone that I could text here or there. But for the most part, I think it's still good old fashioned email.
Oh, I love it. That sounds much better. I would rather be rejected by email than by phone, just saying back in the, my 25, 30 years ago when I was doing it and had to be rejected by phone all the time. It was awful. So email. Well, many listening are like, that's so old school. For some of us, I don't know, that's music to my ears. Better than the phone. So a couple of final thoughts or questions for you. What is something you wish you would have known when you got into the business and the industry about the media and communications that you would like to share with our listeners? Something that you know now that perhaps you didn't know then?
Something I wish I had known 15, maybe even 20 years ago when I started in this industry. I think people assume you have to have a background in journalism. You should have gone to journalism school to be in this field. And I didn't. I have my degree in communications, but it's actually in corporate and organizational communication, very different than PR and external comms. You don't have to have a background in journalism. You can have a background in a lot of things and be in a role like PR or strategic marketing. But one of the skill sets that I think is invaluable in this role is being able to be that strategic mind. So when it comes to know, we've talked a lot about who to pitch and how to pitch and where to pitch, but you have to have that strategic mind of why am I doing this and who's going to listen to it? And that just takes a lot of practice. That just takes a lot of experience. That takes a lot of getting to know the market that you're in. Doesn't take a specialized degree. It doesn't take anything like that. It just takes the time and effort. And it also takes a real passion for this work, whether it's nonprofit or marketing, communication, PR role. It just takes a passion for it. And I think those coming into this role, and I specifically am talking to the nonprofit folks, you do have to have a passion for it. Because if you don't, people will see that very quickly. And if you do, people will see that very quickly. And they'll be able to feel that from you and from your heart.
It's really good advice, particularly for those who have always wondered about dabbling in this field or wondered if they need to have those credentials to actually speak to a journalist, which what I hear you saying loud and clear is you don't. But what you do need to do is keep it simple, keep it clear, practice, be intentional, and put yourself in the other person's shoes and think about what they are trying to accomplish. I think one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past and even today is just what are the goals? What are you trying to accomplish with, right? A story that what are you trying to get across? What message are you trying to get across? And putting yourself in their shoes. There's a bit of, I think nonprofit professionals do an amazing job with that empathy and putting themselves in other people's shoes. And I hear that with what you're saying. Strategically, that can be the difference.
100%. And I think people have such a soft spot for nonprofits because we are doing the work in the community. Every single nonprofit, whether Las Vegas or wherever you are nationwide, we are doing the work. A very popular phrase now is community safety net, but it is so true. We're providing the resources for folks who don't have it and who need it. And without nonprofits, without those of us doing the nonprofit work every single day, we would have a lot of folks out there who go without resources or food or things like that. And I think one of the things that I love about this work in nonprofit is not only do we give all those things to our community members, but we also give them hope. It doesn't matter what type of nonprofit you work in. I have seen it in every role I've had. We give people hope. And that is something that at the end of the day, when I clock out at 5 o'clock, I go home and I say, like, the work I did might have been stressful, might have been hard, but we gave somebody hope. And that is priceless.
Such a good reminder. We're hope givers.
Yes.
I love that. So as we wrap up, is there anything else we haven't talked about that you want to make sure gets imparted to our listeners who are on the journey of trying to figure out how to deal with the media, how to get their message across? I know we've covered a lot. Anything you want to just reaffirm or anything else that we haven't talked about?
Oh, I love what you said earlier. I think, it really is those three things. Keep your message clear, keep it consistent, and walk in a place of confidence. So when you walk into that studio or you get a phone call from a reporter, you know exactly what you're saying and why you're saying.
All right. To everyone who is listening, I hope you got as much out of that as I did. And a warm thank you to Linda. Linda Bridges, folks, who has seen it all, been through it all from a communications lens. Probably that's a podcast for another day, right? But somebody who was willing to take her time and share her expertise with us today. And we are so incredibly grateful to you, Linda, for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Stacey.
And we will look forward, folks, to seeing you in another couple weeks for the next episode of Nonprofit Everything.